News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening and welcome to the news today. UK Prime Minister David Cameron addressed Parliament today in his latest push for authorization to join the air campaign against the Islamic State. It comes amid heightened Moscow-Ankara tensions following the downing of a Russian fighter jet as the Syria arena becomes increasingly busy and complex. I24 News defense correspondent Shaiban Arid has the details.
French President François Hollande meets his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin Thursday in Moscow, with the focus on the common fight against the Islamic State. In the wake of the Paris terror attacks, there has been an outpouring of international support for France, as world leaders rush to appear alongside the French head of state. Some nations have stepped up their own efforts against IS, but disagreements still abound, even within the anti-IS coalition.
I hope that Germany can engage further in the fight against Daesh in Syria and Iraq, and I will be very attentive to what the Chancellor has to say, knowing the rules which exist there in terms of external intervention.
A German lawmaker confirmed Thursday the country will send tornado reconnaissance planes to Syria to support the French. However, they will not take part in actual airstrikes.
Statement, the Prime Minister.
For his part, UK Prime Minister David Cameron hopes to begin British airstrikes in Syria and is seeking to gain Parliament's approval, something that is easier said than done.
If we won't act now, when our friend and ally France has been struck in this way, then our allies in the world can be forgiven for asking, if not now, when?
Jeremy Corbyn.
In the light of the record of Western military intervention in recent years, including Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya, does the Prime Minister accept that UK bombing of Syria could risk more of what President Obama called unintended consequences?
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. There will not be a vote in this House unless there's a clear majority for action, because we will not hand a publicity coup to ISIL.
Cameron will probably need the backing of some Labour MPs, but at this stage it remains unclear whether he has enough support. France has already invoked the EU's mutual defence clause against Islamic State, but not Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which calls on all partners to respond to an attack on any NATO member. There are several possible reasons for this. Russia would be wary of any official NATO operation in Syria, as the alliance was originally established to counter Soviet expansion. NATO is also opposed to the Assad regime, which Moscow backs. Moreover, the Russians were particularly supportive of France following the events in Paris.
French aircraft carrier fleet will join the action in the region. We should establish direct contact with the French Navy. The two navies will fight alongside each other as allies.
Also, invoking Article 5 would risk further exposing differences in strategy between member countries. One NATO member, Turkey, has been accused of maintaining certain ties with IS, economic and otherwise.
The biggest supporter of Islamic State is the Assad regime. They say Turkey buys oil from IS. People with authority make these claims. Shame on them. Turkey's suppliers of gas and oil are clear. Our main supplier is Russia.
But relations between Ankara and Moscow have reached a low point following the downing of a Russian fighter jet by Turkey near the border with Syria. This means that future disagreements are likely in what is becoming an increasingly complex international effort.
Yes, and with me right now here in the studio is Ali Wakat, I24 News senior Middle East analyst. Good evening. And also Shaiban Arid, I24 News defense correspondent. Good evening. Good evening. Let's start with you with the latest updates coming and the latest meeting between France and Russia.
Right. Well, François Hollande is already in Moscow and has met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. They basically released an interesting statement that says both countries must unite. Putin saying this, both countries must unite against a mutual enemy. And also Hollande himself has called for a grand coalition, telling Putin that the time has come for a grand coalition against IS. More of the same sort of momentum that we have seen that was really, we saw more 2 weeks ago in the immediate aftermath of the Paris attacks. There was a lot of positive momentum and international consensus against IS. And maybe just in relation to the general issue of terrorism in Europe, an update from Germany with the commando units arresting 2 people in Berlin today who were suspected of planning an attack, according to a police spokesman. They were found in 2 different locations in Berlin after a certain search was conducted at a mosque there. That's all the details we know for now.
Ali, just heard Erdogan saying that Putin is not answering his phone calls. Something that you can understand why Vladimir Putin is deciding not to answer the phone calls from Turkey after what just happened. What will be the next step that we will see in the region after the specific incident, or it will just stay an incident?
After Turkey had targeted the Russian plane, I said here that, in my opinion, the Russians will try to invest and to use this attack in order to improve their situation vis-à-vis the international community, mainly the Western community and the anti-Assad coalition. And we are seeing in the last days and hours that the Russians are establishing the S-400, and the Russians are expressing less flexibility vis-à-vis the future of President Assad. And the Syrian sources we talked to in the last 2 days said that they believe that there won't be any compromise, because there was some formula discussed in the last days that the international community and the West will try to honor the interests of Russia, but the Russian, on the other hand, will give up the future of President Assad, and he will not be part of any future arrangement. In the last days and hours, we are seeing that the Russians are more firm vis-à-vis President Assad. They are taking measures on the ground, and I think that this might be the beginning of a new situation in which the Russian will try to put all the balls in the basket of President Assad and the Syrian regime.
And it seems that on the other side, we're seeing that Turkey stays put on what it thinks, and it thinks that Assad should not be and should not continue controlling Syria, and they're just acting in a totally different direction.
Yeah, the Turks are basically, this whole incident may have been some sort of attempt by the Turks to send a message to Putin. You need to perhaps get out of Syria, perhaps, or at least lower his amount of action, let's say, in certain areas that really interfere with Turkish interests. One of the things that I find pretty interesting is the debate over the apology, whether an apology is needed. Much has been written about the importance of an apology in international relations, and in this case, Moscow says it has received no official apology from Turkey. The Turks say we don't need to apologize when we're talking about an occasion where we are right, but they do say we express sorrow. We are sorry for this affair. Basically saying that you can express sorrow but not apologize. There's a difference there, and it, I think, brings to mind past occurrences relating to Turkey and Israel.
Lucy, I suggest to see the impact of the Russian intervention in other arenas, not only in Syria. For example, in Yemen, we are seeing the Houthis gaining more and more territories. We are seeing the Saudis withdrawing not only from the ground. The Emirates are not anymore part of the Saudi coalition in Yemen. They shifted, and they are now supporting President Assad in Syria. We are seeing that the Saudis are presenting a more flexible condition vis-à-vis the future solution in Yemen. They are not conditioning that the Houthis will withdraw from the cities that they occupied, but they are asking, and even they are not demanding the Houthis to give up their weapons, and they are asking only that the Houthis will recognize the legitimacy of President Hadi, and that they will come to the table of negotiations in Muscat, Oman. This is on one hand. On the other hand, we are seeing the allies of Saudi Arabia in Lebanon, the Al-Mustaqbal stream, meeting with Slimane Frangieh, an ally of Syria, an ally of President Assad, and maybe the Saudis will be ready that the president in Lebanon, even if it is not Michel Aoun, the one that Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah want to see as the future president of Lebanon, it will be someone from the camp of Iran and Syria, in this case, Slimane Frangieh.
I want to ask you, gentlemen, about, let's say, the position of Britain. That we're seeing David Cameron today trying to convince the parliament, trying to convince his own country to actually join forces with the coalition. And from the other side, we're seeing Germany, that until now we spoke that Germany is pretty out of the game. Germany, if we can define what is happening in history, Germany is trying to prevent from getting into any wars. What is changing right now? Germany will find itself, after what we're seeing, maybe deep in the war with Daesh, or it doesn't need it right now?
I'm not sure that we're going to see a really serious commitment from the side of the Germans. You know, it's been token sort of, you could say they were throwing them a bone. They basically added a few reconnaissance flights at this point. That's not a major intervention in Syria, and they have increased their support for the Kurdish rebels. That is the minimum, I think, that could be expected. I think the French were probably expecting something more. The major question is, I think, perhaps the British, who it needs to be said, are already bombing in Iraq. The question is if they will bomb in Syria, and it's a big political problem for Cameron. He may very well have that support, but it's a very interesting political battle actually within the Labour Party, whether some people will sort of defect onto the Conservative side or onto Cameron's side and perhaps defy the leader, Jeremy Corbyn.
Lucy, two notes. After the Paris attacks, French politicians said that they feel that France is isolated and alone in its war against the Islamic State and against the threat of jihadists within Europe, and that they expect from Europe to express their solidarity not only by condemning the attacks, but by backing and supporting France in its war. And the second question, that it is now we are seeing a certain dynamism of Western leaders that are trying to discuss the strategy vis-a-vis the Islamic State, and we thought that this strategy was already done last year when the coalition was formed. It seems like it is now the beginning of the war against the Islamic State, and I had the impression that a coalition of more than 50 states was formed last year, led by the United States in order to eradicate the Islamic State. And the question, what happened in these 13-14 months, and why now, in November 2015, 14 months after the declaration of the foundation of this coalition, we are discussing the strategy to adopt vis-a-vis the Islamic State? And is this relied in any way to the fact that during these 14 months, the Islamic State did not stop of progressing, at least until the Russian intervention in Syria?
Yes. For now, Shabnari, thank you very much. Ali, just you stay with me for a short while. First headline that we had this evening, and it's concerning French President François Hollande meeting in Moscow. Christian Malard is with us live from the Paris studio, waiting for us still for some kind of a statement coming out from these two. So, Christian, why the meeting is taking so long? They have a lot of things to discuss, more than the terror attacks in Paris?
Well, Putin and Hollande have really to find common ground, and it's not that easy to reach an agreement about what President Hollande would dream of or would hope as being the great international coalition with the Americans, the French, the Russians, the British, and other Arabic countries. I think, according to the echoes we get from Moscow, even if we wait for the joint press conference any moment with the two presidents, we think that it will be more an agreement on a cooperation, military cooperation, than on a big coalition. It seems that the French and the Americans will be working on their own coalition, exchanging informations, targeting different targets they will talk about, and the Russians will go their way. The only thing is, we have to make Mr. Putin understand that the big target, the main target, is destroying, eradicating Daesh, and ask him also, will he hear? We don't know yet. Ask him also not to attack with his planes the troops of the international coalitions, the Syrian oppositions to Bashar al-Assad, which is backed by the Western coalition. So this is another point. And now there is also the point to solve is discussion with Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, and definitely it has been defended by President Obama after the big incident between Russia and Turkey yesterday. And definitely Turkey is not that reliable ally, knowing that they consider Daesh as being less dangerous than the Kurdish, and they have left Daesh people transiting from Turkey to Syria. So we have a problem on the Western coalition with Turkey, and at the same time it's a matter of trust also, and the Russians are very careful with the Turkish. So
yes.
All these discussions.
Yes, Christian, exactly on this point of this trust, how much do the Russians actually trust the French to do the job?
Oh, The relationship between Putin and Hollande have been improving during the last few months. Definitely, the French understand that they have to cope with, they have to work hand in hand with Russia. We need the Russians because the Russians can help about the Syrian problems on the ground with Bashar al-Assad on the one hand. The Syrian can deal with the Iranians on the ground as we have Iranian troops on the ground, with Syrian troops and Iraqi troops and the Kurdish. Now we need to extend more on the ground. And this is the pole of the discussion, and we try to make sure that we don't have that many bones of contention. And this is what we are expecting to hear in the coming minutes.
Yes, of course, just for our viewers who speak French, I will send them to go and watch the French channel because you will give some more information there. Thank you very much, Christian Malal. Thank you for